The lady stared at the Green Knight in disbelief. Peace? You want to talk about peace? The Green Man nodded. I do. I grow tired of this war between us. It doesn't help either of our causes, and it's time we brought it to an end. The lady looked at her old enemy with a distinct level of distrust. When we stood upon the plains of Vanar, a place I can scarcely remember now, you told me that you would not stop until one of us was ashes in time. The Green Man laughed, sketching a small bow. My lady, I am weary of this conflict. It gains us nothing to fight. It only weakens us. It is time we ended this conflict and had peace amongst us. Tobias came up behind her, whispering something in her ear. The two held a quiet conversation as her other Brandylow got into position to defend their mistress if it came to it. Grandpa and his party stood ready too, and Dr. Winters and her mate had made a sort of triangle around the big knight. The big warrior was alone, though the presence of the Winter Court might have made him feel a little more secure. The Warden was still over by the refreshment table, watching it all unfold, as his interest in joining the fight was still unknown. Still, without an army at his back, the defenders of the garden felt confident that they could vanquish him, just as they had last time. Mab, said a regal voice from behind the lady, this is most unusual. What are you up to? Titania had her arms crossed over her chest as she glowered at Queen Mab, the other darkening as she became angry. You dare accuse me of... But the Green Man stepped in front of her. My apologies, Queen of Summer, but I felt it might be best if this request was brought before both courts. The lady and I have a feud that has lasted for centuries, and if it is ever to end, then it will not be ended without the promise of safe conduct. Safe conduct, the lady said, laughing without any real mirth. The last time you promised me safe conduct, you turned me into a statue. That was war, my lady. What I am suggesting is peace, to our mutual benefit. What do you say? Will you hear my terms? The lady looked at her Brandylow, Tobias, Randy, and Sam, but Randy just shrugged at her. Couldn't hurt to hear him out, I reckon, Randy said. Besides, Sam put in, if we don't like what he has to say, we can just toss him out of the party. The lady turned back to her old adversary. Very well then, speak your piece. 7 days hence, on the eve of the new year, I want to meet you here in your domain and sign peace accords. At the heart of your power, the lady said skeptically, on the anniversary of my defeat at your hands. I have spent the year contemplating my revenge and my defeat, and I have decided again that it would be pointless to retaliate. Clearly, you are the stronger warrior, and I have no desire to fight with you again. The lady glanced back at those assembled behind her, the ones who had fought with her in the War of Winter, and nodded after some deliberation. Very well. Queen Mab, do you promise safe conduct for such a signing? Queen Mab smiled. I do not, lady. These are not court matters, and are matters between vassals. I will say this, she said, looking at the Green Man. If you attempt some mischief and are unsuccessful, then I will banish you from my court, and you will no longer have the protection of winter. You will be adrift within this world, beholden only to yourself, unless Titania manages to scoop you up. Titania laughed. I fear my court is too warm for such a warrior. He would melt within the heart of summer. The Green Man looked back at her and seemed to weigh the warning for a moment. Grandpa sucked in a breath, seeing more in that look than anyone else there, but it fled as quickly as it had come. Agreed. I will will see you in 7 days, my lady. Until then." He bowed low and backed out the way he had come, leaving the party a twitter with excited chatter. The lady worried at her lip again, looking back at the group that was still gathered behind her. Some of them were friends, others barely allies, and some of them complete strangers, but the lady felt they were her best hope. She did not for a second believe that her old adversary had turned over a new leaf, and she would need all the help that she could get if he sprung a trap this year. "Please, everyone, return to the party. Let us not let this evening's events put a pall over the evening's festivities." They turned slowly back to their conversations, but it was clear that the party was at an end. "If I hold a council," she said, turning back to the group, "would you come?" "Of course," Grandpa said. "We'll be there," Dr. Winter agreed, her eyes sliding to the Warden. "Anything for my allies," he answered, sounding bored. "We'll be there too," said Sam and Randy and Tobias, nodding in turn. "And me," John said. "I want to help as well." The lady smiled. "Thank you. I'll see you all in 2 days, around lunchtime. Let us convene then and form a plan for this meeting." The party broke up not long after, the Fae begging off and leaving the lady with her children and her allies from the town. In the end, she supposed she had known that they would be the ones that she would have to depend on. "Are you sure this is wise, Gramps?" Marcus asked. "Why wouldn't it be?" Grandpa said, coughing a little as he cleared the phlegm from his throat. Glimmer had said her goodbyes after the party, returning to the camp with her people. She made Marcus promise to call her if anything came up, and said that she would visit him after the meeting to get all the details. She departed for the woods after giving him a very heated kiss, leaving Marcus a little flustered. John had said his goodbyes as well, telling them he would see them at the meeting, and now it was just the two of them in the cab of Grandpa's truck as they rode home through the Christmas Eve snow. "Well, you sound a little rough, and we barely made it out with our skins the last time." "Pish-posh! What happened to all that coming into your power nonsense from earlier?" Marcus gripped the steering wheel a little harder. "It's been a year since I've been in his presence, Grandpa. I convinced myself that it was from the heat of battle, but he's very intimidating." Grandpa nodded. "He isn't that, kiddo, but we can't back down. This is our backyard, and the lady is our friend. If we don't help her, then what sort of neighbors would we be?" "The bad kind, I guess," Marcus said, turning left as they headed up the mountain. Outside, the snow was coming down in white trails, and he was a little worried that the truck might not be able to handle the climb. The road was becoming lost amongst all that white, and Marcus had to guess where it was more than once. "Say we don't help her," Grandpa said, thumping his cane on the floor of the old truck. "Say the green man somehow pulls off something and takes over the garden. I wouldn't want that old spook so close to my hearth. Would you?" Marcus shook his head. "No, I suppose not." "In that case, it seems our hands are tied," Grandpa said. "Do you imagine the others will feel the same?" Grandpa smiled. "Dr. Winters and her partner will, for certain. I'd stake my life on that. John will, too. He said as much. The Warden might, and the Brandylow certainly will. That's got to count for something." "Yeah, I suppose it does," Marcus said with a little snort. "But get some rest," Grandpa advised. "You'll need your strength for what's to come later." "And you need a breathing treatment," Grandpa said as they pulled up into the yard. Grandpa pulled a sour face, but he couldn't really argue. "Are you going to the meeting?" Pamela had been taking off her party dress and getting into something more comfortable when Marguerite ventured the question. Pamela hadn't really thought about it. She had assumed that she would. She was the town's representative in matters like this. Unelected, but still involved. She had a duty to the town and needed to help them. If the green man meant to do something underhanded, then she owed it to the lady to help her. I had intended to, yes. And you will go with them when they make the negotiations? Well, of course. Marguerite nodded. Good. I was hoping you would. They may need you. Do you imagine your brother will go? Pamela shrugged. Who can say what that old villain will do? I know he and the lady have some sort of deal worked out, so I just assumed that he would come too. I like her, Marguerite said, smiling. She reminds me of you. You two have a lot in common. Pamela laughed. That's flattering, but she's on a whole different level than I am. True, Marguerite said, wrapping her arms around the doctor's neck. But the two of you care deeply for this town. She is not, how you say, without faults, but she has made this place her home, and as you have. She sometimes takes from the town, but so do we all, no? Dr. Winters nodded. Maggie had a point. Dr. Winters was not guiltless in that either. She collected the people in the town together, helping them forget their problems and helping them get over their trauma, but she knew that wasn't all there was to it. In a way, Dr. Winters, the winter part of it, was just stocking her pantry with her favorite foods. Inside the good doctor, there was a parasite that wanted to feed, but there was also a woman who wanted to protect. Those sides were often at war with each other, but more often than not, she found a strange sort of harmony between them. It was odd to have such a duality within you, but such was her life. Now, Maggie said, kissing her cheek, come to bed, you. It's a little early for bed, isn't it? Pamela laughed. I am not speaking of sleeping, Maggie said, and her words made a flush creep up Pamela's neck. She went to bed, unable to fight this pull any more than the warring of personalities within her. Such was life. The warden stood on his catwalk again, watching the snow fall lazily on the ground. They would be in it tomorrow, he knew. The inmates turned into the children they often acted like when the snow fell, and tomorrow they would hold rec period, and it would be full of snowball fights and snowmen with the kind of breasts that you often saw in pin-up girls, and trips to the infirmary when his charges got a little too exuberant and slipped on the ice, and a lot of laughter and joy. He grimaced, feeling a bit like the Grinch as he thought of it all. He'd have indigestion tomorrow, that was for a certainty. The whiskey in the glass was something expensive, not the cheap Walmart swill that had mediated the palaver between the sheriff and his Jacob Marley. It might as well have been piss tonight, because the warden couldn't make it do much more than swirl and swirl and swirl. He saw the years and the miles and the conquests and the defeats in that swirling wave of amber liquid, and it made him long to send it tumbling into the woods that surrounded the prison. The moon was full overhead, a bloated egg ready to burst, and he looked up at it and sighed. They would expect him at the meeting. Of course they would. Well, they wouldn't, but she would. The lady and he had maintained a steady alliance for nearly a year, and he wanted to keep it that way. Until these, whatever they were, could be cleaned out of his death house, he needed her to take care of the death row inmates for him. As it stood, they were being held in Quad 2 of confinement, the recently renovated spot where the creatures had lain dormant for so many years. But therein lay the problem, too. He was giving her 2 a month, and despite his best efforts, not nearly enough people had death sentences to keep up that bargain. Sure, he could keep it up for another 3 months. It had been a good year for provable homicide, and the governor did like to appear firm on criminals. But he was going to have to start culling lifers soon. Killing 6 sheep was one thing, but mutton from his own table was another. "Que sera, sera," he whispered, draining the glass and throwing it into the woods, a toss of about 2.5 miles or more. He heard it shatter, but as he tracked its movement, he saw something. Someone was on the edge of the woods. Someone was standing beside the freshly fallen snow and looking back at him. He was up and in the air before he could stop himself. He pulled glamour around him so the people that were in the yard wouldn't think they had lost their shit, and he was flapping his wings and eating up the sky as he rocketed towards the tree line. If they saw him, the Warden's presence didn't seem to bother them. He landed gracefully, kicking up snow as he came down on a knee, and as the glamour fell away, he saw someone that he hadn't thought about in quite some time. "You? What the hell are you doing here?" The hair was long, the clothes were more leather than fabric, and the man's face was gaunter than it had been the last time that he had seen him, but the Warden would have recognized Marcus Reese anywhere. Reese, the only inmate to date to have successfully escaped his prison, at least that he knew of. He had thought Reese was dead. Most of them died if they made it to the woods, but after that cryptic little message last year, the Warden hadn't been so sure. Maybe others had escaped. Maybe they hadn't been killed in the woods like he had believed. Maybe the creatures that lived there were losing their touch. "Just scouting the land. It's important to get a lay of the land before a battle," the man said, his voice raspy from disuse. The Warden laughed. "Oh, are we having a battle? I had no idea." "That was kind of the point," Reese said from the depths of his hood. "Don't worry, though. You will soon. It's taken a lot of work, but I finally got the numbers shored up, and I believe this is the year that we take out Stragview for good." The Warden rolled his eyes. "Be my guest. You wouldn't be the first. I think you'll find that the prison has more secrets than you give it credit for." Reese smiled, as does the forest. Behind him, the eyes of 100 squinting terrors came to life. The Warden was rarely scared, but he felt a little uneasy as those eyes fell on him. They were in the trees, they were thick on the ground, and Reese did not seem terribly worried about them. "Your new friends probably forgot to mention that we have a peace accord from long before you were born. They've been my friends since I came to this place, so very long ago, and they have long protected the prison." "So they have, but they tell me that your offerings have been less frequent lately. No one is escaping your cage. You haven't fed them in a long, long time. I made them a better offer, and they decided to take it." "Oh? Do tell." "They want fresh meat. They want what's in your prison. They want to be allowed to roam outside the woods. And I suppose Santa is just going to bring it to them in his sleigh, is he?" The growling from the woods was loud and low, and as the nightmare creatures began to stalk around him, the Warden's smile became a scowl. "Oh no. Like all good things, we'll take what we want. Our numbers grow, Warden, while yours appear to dwindle. I suppose you'll just have to come and see, won't you?" "Soon," Reese said, backing into the woods as the beasties came on. "We have nothing but time. Do you?" They surged forward, but the Warden was already skyward again. They didn't dare come too far from the forest, or so he believed. They had never dared come closer than the road, but as he pushed for the sky, he was in for a surprise. One of those shiny black terrors shot out of the trees and clamped onto his leg. It dangled from him, bearing down on him as he swung there, and the Warden hissed as he dealt the creature a blow across the head that caved it in like an old soda can. He shook him off as the thing fell to earth in a heap, and the Warden was clear before any more surprises could befall him. Well, not quite. When he landed on the catwalk of his tower, his leg buckled, and he fell hard onto the metal grating. He looked down and saw the pant leg of his suit was oozing a dark, viscous substance. He just stared at it for a moment, not sure what to make of it. He had been hurt. Nothing had hurt him in a long time. The longer he looked at it, the more he realized that he would have to do something. The first thing was that he would have to go back on something that he had never intended to make good on. And the other was that he would have to go to this meeting in a few days. If the wolf was truly at the door, he would need friends all the more. You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.